3:30 haven't arrived. We'll call the meeting of the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to order. Does anybody wish to make a public comment? Anybody wish to make a public comment? Anybody wish to make a public comment? If not, we will move on to the approval of the minutes of the June 22nd meeting, which were in your packet.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved by Gibbs. Is there a second? Seconded by Leahy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. And for the record, Supervisor McEwen indicated he would be a few minutes late, and Supervisor Young is spending time with his family. So, next, educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports, the American Rescue Plan Act. I just wanted to go over once again our tentative schedule, and we have confirmation as to the first two dates and waiting to hear back from Hatley on the third, but we will be meeting at the Edgar High School Auditorium on August 3rd for our meeting. Well, first of all, we'll kick it off at the Eastern Western Towns Association, and I've spoken with both Alan and Keith. And Kurt, I think he's going to put you on the agenda for part of that for just the ARPA update. So we'll look at that. But then on the 3rd, we'll be in Edgar. The 10th, we will have our regular meeting here. And at the end of that meeting, we will go into a public hearing on the use of the American Rescue Plan dollars. And then I'm hoping to hear back from the clerk from Hatley relative to our ability to meet there on the 17th. Now, we really didn't set it. We sort of talked about a time of 5:30. Is that a good time, bad time? But we need to nail that down. I think that it catches people either after work or before evening activities. So we'll plan on having those run from, I don't know that we want to put an end time because then we're bound to be there, but we'll begin at 5:30 and we'll go for however long it takes.
Yep.
Allison had asked me whether we expected everyone to be at the meetings, and if possible, it would be great if the committee members could be present, understanding that we've got a lot going on with this committee. The thought is we would do a high-level overview of what the American Rescue Plan Act was, what sort of eligible activities there are. We will take the questions that the city had developed, and we will refine those a little bit about what's been impacted through the pandemic, and how would these investments that you're proposing help with the recovery, and how would it benefit the county? And we would direct those toward the public and ask them to comment on those. And we'll go from there, and we'll try to perhaps spread the presentation around among the committee members to get everybody involved, and so we can work on that even, before that August 3rd meeting, and give everybody a chance. Any other thoughts on logistics for that? We'll work with Sarah on trying to get the word out. We'll try to get it on the website. We'll get something to all the supervisors, broadcast it at the Towns Association meeting, and try to, as best we can, get the word out. Pete Weincheck knows about it, so I imagine he'll push it out there.
And just a note, Eastern Western Towns is July 29th at 7 p.m. at the Rib River Ballroom.
We'll get that on the calendar too, as soon as we can, so I'll work on. Chrissy, do you do that, or should I just work with Kim?
I think Kim takes care of that.
I'll work with Kim. Any other questions on that? If not, we'll move on to broadband expansion update, and that's kind of a placeholder, but I wanted to bring the committee up to date on a couple of things. We have received to date interest from 4 different internet service providers relative to this round for the Public Service Commission American Recovery Plan Act grant. We're still waiting for some of the details on them. We've received requests from Bug Tussle for a pretty comprehensive plan, Serenity or Wittenberg-Tel for a very localized plan in the Nori Plover area, Mayflower and Pike Lake area, from Century Wireless for, we're still waiting for some of the details, and LTD Inc. gave us a proposal for lacking some of the details, and hopefully we'll get some of that. We've also heard some interest expressed on behalf of a couple of other providers that we have not seen. The Broadband Task Force is going to be reviewing those tomorrow to make a determination of which ones we will partner with, and in context of partnering, we would pledge financial support for them for a local commitment. Bug Tussle is not asking the county for any money as part of their grant application, but they are asking us to potentially support bonding with adopting a resolution. It's something that we had done in the past relative to Foremost Foods, lending the county's credit to them. They would pay us back over time with a premium, and they are looking to do some towers and some middle mile fiber to strengthen those, and with a long-term goal of trying to get fiber to the home. Earlier today, Chair Gibbs and I and others were on a call with the firm Geo, whatever, but they do speed testing and other services, provide services. There's a potential that we may want to contract with them. We have $177,000 left in our capital budget. We don't know if they're the best firm or others, but they could verify where we have internet service and where we don't and what the speeds are, and they can give us a lot of information. The task force is looking at doing a survey. The question, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow, whether the survey, this would be cheaper than doing the survey, and can we get the information we need from that? But we may need to come back here and ask for a potential transfer of funds to pay for that service, giving you more or less of a heads up. They also provide some other services relative to design cost that we may or may not be interested in, be following the work of what Design 9 did, and just at first blush, I think that their numbers are pretty close to where Design 9 was. But they would give us potentially targeted approaches to providing service throughout the county. Design 9 would have covered 85 to 95% of the county. With this, we may have the ability to look at approaches. They don't deliver, design, or provide any of the services, but they could provide us with approaches and approximate cost of providing 100% coverage in the county. But that's where we are right now with broadband activities. We'll know a lot more tomorrow and at the end of the month when the grant applications are due. There's a potential that we may have more requests than we have money, and we'll have to figure out whether that comes out of the American Rescue or Recovery Plan dollars, which is one of those eligible activities, or whether we would come back to the county for a transfer into the KIP, should those grant applications be successful.
Geo Partners Broadband Mapping is the company's name.
And they're doing lots of work all across the country.
Yep.
It's really an interesting approach. Any questions on broadband expansion updates? All right, budget timeline and preliminary assumptions. Christie.
I just updated the packet. What this is a timeline that's going to tell you, it also goes out to the department heads, but I'm going to quickly tell you where you fit in and what important work you need to do and when it needs to be done by. And there's an error I had made on the timeline, and so the packet has been updated. So we'll start doing department operating budgets. You'll see some budget assumptions, and we'll get some from the employee resource and some other ones that we're gonna have. They will be preliminary because as we mature into the budget season, we'll have more information. Okay. Got it. So what's going to happen is we'll get you some budget assumptions, and we will be meeting with you throughout the course of for developing the operating budget. In September, the county administrator will meet with departments. You will see the CIP plan without the funding, the projects that you approve at facilities from last week or last meeting and this meeting will be in that CIP plan that will be provided to you, which is the same as it always has been. Then the departments will have until the mid-September to get their budgets approved by county administration. And you have a meeting on September 27th. That's your educational meeting. But once a year, you will be meeting at the airport. That will be the day at 4 o'clock. You're going to have your normal, regular business meeting. 5 o'clock, we meet with Portage County's Finance Committee to go over the airport's budget and get that approved for incorporation into our county budget. Then you have 2 meeting dates. You have October 5th, which you will be reviewing the county administrator's recommended budget for 2022. You'll have another meeting October 12th, again, being able to review and potentially approve the 2020 county administrator's recommended budget. But you must have the budget approved to pass on to the county board no later than October 15th, because if you take a look later on the timeline, November 4th is when you hold your public hearing, and the budget that you approve must be published in the newspaper no earlier than 15 days, no later than 15 days prior to November 5th. So if you count backwards on a calendar, that would be October 20th. If you give a thumbs up on October 15th, I can forward that information to the Wausau Daily Herald on the 19th and make sure that the proof is correct so it can be published on time. So that was a little bit where I had another meeting date on October 15th. It really isn't, but you have up until that date to make sure you have a budget that you can pass on and recommend. So it will be published by October 20th so that we meet that November 4th deadline. But you will be meeting as a county the finance committee will do a presentation to the full county board on that date, October 21st, on the budget. Now the problem, or not problem, depending on how you look at it, is you cannot make any changes to that budget because it has been published as is for the November 4th meeting date. But you'll give information on it, and then the board, depending on how you want to run that meeting, can provide dialogue, but there will be no chance for you to make an amendment at that time. Then on the 4th, you have your public hearing, and on November 9th, you will approve the county budget. So those were the changes that I had. One, I made a few of them, didn't change the 2022 budget. Secondly, that October 21st date is going to be a presentation of the full board, but there can be no changes because you would be past the publication deadline.
So Chrissy, last year we kind of glossed over the KIP. So under this scenario, we have pulled the KIP process into this committee, and we'll have the discussion on that at our next meeting and begin that process of approval. But I want to make sure that we somehow in this.
In all meetings, the presentation of the 2022 capital improvement plan would be provided to the Finance Committee in September. So if you want to do something in August, that's great.
I'm looking for a presentation to the county board, so if we could, maybe just so we don't lose sight of it, do a presentation to the county board at the September county board meeting on the KIP. If we could build that into the schedule, then we're all aware of it, and it's sort of our timeline. Because last year, again, we just glossed over it, and I think that there were some concerns that we might have done it too quickly. So if we could build that in there, that would be great. Allison, anything from a KIP perspective?
No, that sounds fine.
Kurt?
Not from the KIP. You know, we look for input from the county board on the budget, though prior to adopting the budget here. Did we not last year? I don't see that built into this timeline. How are, you know, because if we adopt the budget or approve the budget on the October 12th, there's no changes and there's no ability to change it till after or until the November 4th after the public hearing or before November 9th when it's adopted. And I thought we wanted a process where the county board was more engaged in the budget and understood the budget and sought their input prior to us approving the budget from the Finance Committee standpoint.
You are correct. We did talk about that, so.
Wondering if there's, and looking at, you know, getting the budget from the administrator on October 5th, and then, you know, there's only a week in between before we would have to, well, technically 10 days before we have to approve the budget. But that doesn't give us, as a committee, a lot of time to interact with the board and get their feedback if they see that there's some changes that need to be made to the budget.
The biggest problem that we have in this timeline is that our software that we use is 25 years old and does not have a budget component. What happens is we basically do manual spreadsheets. So the timeline is very short between what I get from the departments to the recommended to provide it to you. We'll be actually running probably till the very end before we get it to you. When we go to a new software, we've definitely made sure that we would have that in it. And so it's really a limitation of what we are able to get accomplished in that amount of time, because we are literally building spreadsheets to balance a $160 million annual budget.
We invite members of the board to come to our meetings that are already scheduled to be more of a part of it, or do you want a separate meeting?
Well,
Go ahead.
I guess my thought potentially is, you know, either that, or I know in the past, we used to have a full presentation to the full board of the budget. That was relatively modestly attended. I'm wondering if the possibility of moving up the education meeting in during the October, even though leave the voters meeting, but at least have the education meeting potentially on October 5th in conjunction with the Finance Committee, so that the administrator's presentation of the budget is at the same time the presentation to the full board. Thoughts? And that way we could seek their input at least between the October 5th and October 12th. If they could attend the October 12th meeting if they have some potential budget amendments that they would want this committee to consider after it accepts the budget from the administrator, but before we approve the budget and finalize it. Again, understanding it's just reallocation, it's not, the budget is the budget, but it's a matter of whether or not there's a potential willingness on behalf of the board and/or this committee to make adjustments to that budget at that time.
I'm looking at the schedule, and the problem is that we don't give ourselves much time with the budget, with the publication requirements, which is
100%.
probably outdated, but is the law. So I think the options would be to do it on the 5th or the 12th. If we did it on the 12th, if you did it as an educational meeting, I'm just talking out loud, the only committees that would not have met would have been finance and exec for the month of October, so we could have the educational meeting be the all-encompassing one for the other committees. So the 5th, if you do it on the 5th, we've got time for feedback. If you do it on the 12th, we don't, but then everybody's getting it at the same time. And I worry, if we do it not in the committee setting, but with the full board, would we stifle the discussion on the committee level deferring to the other county board members? I don't know what the answer is. You tell me what the net new construction is going to be, and I'll tell you how easy the budget will be to put together.
You're 100% correct, John. Maybe it's something that we can look at from administrative and come back with some suggestions at the next meeting. I don't know that we've got the answers today, but I know that one of the things that we had talked about was actually having, that presentation to the full board, so the full board had buy-in before and not come with last-minute amendments. But anyway, so
But why don't we flag, if you could, see in this, if you could put down October 5th through the 12th, presentation to the county board. And then we've got that range, just so we capture it in our schedule sometime between one of those days. Does that make sense? Yep. I'm seeing a nod, and John, I'm looking, Jonathan? Nods, okay.
Yep, that makes sense to me. Yep.
All right, are there any other questions or comments relative to the schedules, or we don't really have assumptions yet? That'll be the next meeting. All right, we will proceed with that.
Christie did say something about that 25-year-old accounting system was the top of the line, though, something to that effect.
We'll actually get an accounting system that will be good for accounting.
Wow.
We look forward to that day whenever it occurs. All right, we have a plan. Moving on to discussion and possible action, tax deed bid opening, approval and action. Kim?
Good afternoon, everybody. We have 3 bids that have been received for the Arthur Street property. And the appraisal price on this one is $10,500. So the first bid I have I'm guessing he did not understand because it is for $2,000, which is well below the appraisal price. Bid number 2.
Can you state who the people are that bid?
Sure, I can do that. That one was from, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. It's from Wausau Real Estate, Gizo Ujermelli. Bid number 2 is for $22,105. And that is from Better Tomorrow Investments LLC. And that is accompanied by the 10%. And we have one more. Bid number 3 is in the amount of $22,500, and that is from Ryan Voigt. So those are the 3 bids that we received for the Arthur Street property, 2021-9.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we award the bid to Ryan Voigt for the $22,500 bidding price.
Is there a second?
Fisher to second.
Second, moved by Gibbs, seconded by Fisher. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the sale of the tax deed to Ryan Voigt at the price of $22,500 will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I have a bid for property 2019-1. The set price on that property was $16,000. That was based on the assessed value. And this is past its first reading, so a lower bid can be considered. And I have a bid for $3,000 from Gizo Ujirmelli for the property 2019-1.
Is that a vacant lot, or do we know?
Yes, this is a vacant lot.
And where is it?
It is 9757 Sand Hill Drive in the village of Weston.
And we went through, we advertised it first time, no bids?
Correct. No bids received. This was from, it was the first bid listed in 2019, so it would have been taken in 2018, I believe. It was taken in July of 2018, listed in 2019.
What are your thoughts?
I'll move to accept the bid of $3,000.
What do we have in outstanding, what do we have in that property?
The outstanding taxes when it was taken in July of 2018 were $3,504.38.
Who seconded, I'm sorry.
Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? We have a motion to award the sale of 2019-1 to Wassa Real Estate, Gizo.
Right.
Gizo, for $3,000. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries.
The rest of these are all from Gizo because he brought them in person. 2014-15, 2014-16, and 2014-17. These were all listed at $3,800 at the time. And they have varying amounts of outstanding taxes. The first one, 2014-15, we have a bid for $500. And the outstanding taxes on that one, the payoff figure in September 2013 was $744.15.
How much is the bid for?
The bid is for $500.
Is that the first time that this property's been listed?
It's been on since 2014. But this is the first time we've received any bids on it. These are on Bissell Street over to the northeast of Wassa West ball fields. And these are vacant lots.
On all, there's 3 properties,
There are 3. I have 3 separate bids for them.
Oh.
I can open them
okay?
all at once, or
What
do you want to
this is
handle them one at a
20
time?
So we have 2014-15.
Right,
We have a bid of $5.
$500.
What are your wishes?
Has the committee ever, because we've never received a bid, I guess the question becomes, our policy says that, we are not to accept the bid unless it meets the stated value by the committee. The question becomes, are we, until we have had it published a second time, I'm just questioning whether or not we're potentially going to violate our policy by accepting a bid below the estimated fair market value or the set price by the committee, even though we've never received a bid prior to today's bidding on that property. And so I looked to Corp Counsel as to, are we endangering ourselves by setting a precedent when this is the first time that we've received a bid of $500 on property that we set price on at $3,800? Do we have to reject these bids and go out and bid them again, as we normally would have?
Sorry, just finding a microphone here. I don't think our policy is 100% clear in this particular case. My concern would be that our normal practice would be to reject and repost. I think the spirit of that policy, perhaps not in the letter, but the spirit of that policy would be violated if we accepted a bid below the value that we had previously set. So I guess my advice and my caution to the committee would be strongly consider relisting, especially given the age of the property and the fact that we've previously applied that policy to this type of sale, although not under these exact circumstances.
So do we have what, do we want to deal with them collective? Well, why don't you open it, I would maybe request without objection, request that we open all the bids and see if we can deal with them collectively.
Okay. (2014-16) is also for $500.
The appraised value of,
Well, the set value on all of these were $3,800. I don't believe they were ever appraised. The value was set based off the assessment at the time. And 2014-17 is also for $500.
And it also was assessed at $3,800.
Correct.
Payoffs on each of those properties, $744, I'm assuming they're all.
They're right around $750. $736.90 for 16, and $732.40 for 17.
so what are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman,
Go
I
ahead.
make a motion to reject those bids consistent with our policy and re-advertise those bids, explaining to even the bidder that our policy has not been to accept anything below the set value by this committee, at least on the first bidding.
Is there a second?
Fisher to second.
Six.
And it-
Allison had her finger up first, so,
And implied in that is that we would re-advertise these properties to be bid again concurrently.
the motion is to reject the 3 bids for failure to comply with our policy and to re-advertise the properties. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of rejection of the bids will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, there was a previous motion regarding the 2019 property,
Yes.
which was assessed at 16,000 and the bid was 3,000, which is below the assessed value. I think potentially we have a similar issue on that property.
Was that the,
So-
I thought that one was relisted a second ad?
No.
It was not.
No. This is the first, it's been listed since 2019. So it is past the 2 years where previously we have gone out to get it reappraised. But this is the first bid that has ever come in on that listing.
So that motion was made, it was carried unanimously. Is there a desire to reconsider the motion by which we accepted that bid?
I will make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to reconsider the approval of the sale of property 2019-1.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of reconsideration will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Now we have the issue before us. What is your wish?
No, you've got a motion now on the table. You're at the motion to approve of the sale. So that's where we're at.
We're reconsidering, so you do want to,
So I would urge the committee to vote against the motion to award because it is inconsistent with our policy.
okay. Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a
No,
motion.
no, you have the motion. The
Oh, I'm
motion-
sorry, I'm sorry. We do have
Motion's
the
on the
motion.
table
I'm sorry.
already.
You did, you're right. The motion, so a aye vote would be to accept, a no vote would be to reject. Although, any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay.
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 That motion fails.
And I would also direct the clerk to communicate with the bidder that, again, the same reasons as we've rejected 2014-15, 16, and 17, the same rationale applies to 2019-1. And that a second bidding does afford the committee the ability to accept a bid at that time below the stated value that we've assessed to it.
Okay, so you're also directing a new appraisal for those 4 properties as well?
No, I'm just re-advertising those properties.
Re-advertise, okay, thank you.
Any other questions, discussions? If not, the intent of the committee is clear. And we will move on to the approval of the June claims and question costs. Those were mailed or emailed out last week. What are your wishes relative to the claims and question costs? This would be where a motion would be in order?
Motion to approve claims and question costs.
We move to approve the June claims and question costs. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to intergovernmental budget transfers. Those are in the packet. Christie, is there anything you'd like to highlight or go over? I think they were pretty.
Take the microphone.
So super quick, there's some sheriff and some social service budget transfers. And the social service one on the sex trafficking has been updated because we did not have an expense associated. So we were getting money in and had nowhere to spend it. So that has been updated in the packet for you, and that is my only update.
Any questions? If not, what are your wishes relative to the intergovernmental budget transfers?
Motion to approve and recommend approval to the full board for its consideration.
Move to approve.
Second by Fisher.
Moved by Gibbs, seconded by Leahy. You're always a little slow. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Committee approval of facilities and capital management KIP request for inclusion in the 2022 request. This is where we call on Troy.
Hi, Chairman Robinson, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I just got out of my previous engagement and we need to bring over the indoor, bring the water main that's out on the corner of Lakeview Drive. I'm shifting and everything's trying to take over in my truck here, so trying to shift back to my earpiece. That should be better. The long story short, because comes before the committee, Wausau has requested that we what?
Now you're breaking up.
Now you're breaking up, Troy, real
Meter?
bad.
Can you hear me okay? Am I still on?
Now we can.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to go back to my truck. Okay, now we're good?
Now you're better.
I'll hold the phone and move it. All
Then
right.
all of a sudden you start breaking up again.
The city of Wausau. Oh, no. All right, let me try to switch out to the truck so I can get a better gauge on things, because I don't know when I'm losing you.
Technology is wonderful.
It is wonderful, and I can hear you just fine, so hopefully I'm getting the truck to take over here. But we have a water meter that's located, we've got a water meter that's located out the corner of 1100 Lakeview Drive and Marshall Street. The city of Wausau has asked, this is actually a little over a year ago, asked us to move that into an inside location for water department regulation, on a location inside the, what would be the 1000 Lakeview Drive building, as you can see by the maps that I've included. And we've gone through and discussed this with the excavating contractors, a plumber, and a general contractor for what we would need to move that inside. And we've come up with a solution that's in the corner of the existing theater area. And that's highlighted in sheet A101 and then again C100 of the packet that I put before you. Total price for moving this estimated at $64,800. Pending any questions, and I'm hoping that I'm coming through okay.
Coming through much better now.
So is this, is
I
this
just
a
have to
local,
stand. You remember the old days of holding the antenna? That's me right now.
so Troy, in your discussing this with
City.
the city, was it a local ordinance or was it a state requirement incorporated into the local ordinance?
I never asked if it was state or local, but it was coming from the city water department. So I just made the presumption that the city water department had the request to move everything from the manholes and to inside locations for equipment purposes.
Troy, question. Why would that be
Yes.
the county's cost and to relocate their meter? Wouldn't that be the utility company's cost to relocate that meter?
The way I understood it, that's a great question. And the way I understood it was that we end up purchasing the meter so that becomes Marathon County property. The meter itself does. And the relocation of it because it becomes it's a public utility cost up until it hits Marathon County property. And then from then on in, it becomes ours. That's the way I understood it. I can go for further clarification on that between now and when we have to look any further into this.
So the question before us today is whether we want to advance this for consideration in the 2022 KIP. I'm willing to have a discussion with Eric Lindman from the city relative to the rationale behind this, because it seems like an expensive move. So do we want to advance it while we explore it and try to get?
Is there a concern, Troy, just a dumb question, where the meter is now is in a manhole, I'm assuming the meter is actually
Correct.
a manhole.
That is correct.
And is there a concern that because of its location, it will not continue to serve NCHC? Or is it?
I don't believe, Kurt, I don't believe that's the case. I think what you've got is a confined space. That's one of the concerns. And then it's out in the outside. So the water meter itself, trying to get access to it in inclement weather months, that would be my thought process to it.
That's
It's not far enough that it doesn't freeze, obviously.
Well, I understand that, but I still see this as challenging to me to understand how when a utility provides a utility to a entity, and I'll go back to when I had commercial property in the village, they were responsible with the location of the meter, even in my internal of my facility, internal of the building. And they were responsible for the piping and the meter all the way up until and included in the facility. So I struggle to see how this is a Marathon County issue when we're we are a consumer of the utility from the city of Wausau.
Understood. Kurt, I certainly would be happy to have that conversation, expand that farther with them before we would bring it to incorporating into the budget. That's just one of the things that the city water department was requesting me. I don't remember it was Eric himself specifically, but that was just been something that we've had asked of us on multiple occasions from the city to get that moved inside. Out into an indoor protected location, if you would.
Is this the only one that we're currently having a problem with, or are there more of these that could be out there?
If the question is this the only one that Marathon County has? It's the only one that I've had a request come to me, and if it became because I was doing the addition and remodel project, I've heard of no other water meters that have been requested to be relocated to the interior of any buildings.
Do we know, Troy, if
Thank
we
you.
have, do we know if we have any other meters that service any of the other county facilities that are in manholes that we're aware of?
Kurt, I am not aware of that. Every water meter, and this goes back to doing all the water meter inspections, the backflow inspections with the folks from the state that came around. Everyone that I've dealt with, all the way from going from the west side, TRC, Juvenile, all the way through the courthouse and down to Thomas Street for the Social Services Credit Union building, all those water meters are inside. This is the only one to my knowledge that's outside.
So the issues before us today for basically advancement, not necessarily approval. And I think that gives us some opportunities to explore what our options are. So what are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve and move it on to the CIP process. However, I think we have to have some clarifying information before we approve it. This committee approves it in the CIP overall projects.
Is there a second? Seconded by Leahy. She gave you time this time, Jonathan, but
Just can't win today, I guess.
Craig?
Thank you. I don't disagree with approving it for now, but I don't disagree that we can move it on, but is it necessary that we do this now? Because I agree with Chairman Gibbs that I don't know that this should even be an issue we should even be anticipating to approve. Can it wait?
Technically, it's already late for the process is for the committees to advance for consideration, review, and prioritization projects by July 1st. And we're beyond that. So I think if we're going to follow our own processes, we need to get it in and we can do that evaluation and make the determination that it's not a priority at that time later in the month. But I would think that if we're going to consider it, we should move it forward at this time and we can explore those options. So any other discussion? If not, all is in favor of advancing the project into the KIP process will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. And I will do some follow-up with the city as well and try, maybe you and I can coordinate that discussion. with you
Absolutely.
there. Have you been dealing
Yeah,
primarily with
absolutely.
Eric or with Scott Bowers?
Scott with the water department, and the last time was with him, and it was the city plumbing inspector that came out and was looking at one of the new buildings. So, but I can certainly do that and make that a priority so we can get that information and have that readily available to us as to Chairman Gibbs' questions and your questions as well.
Okay. All right. We will now move on to the resolution to amend the 2021 KIP for the 2022 rolling stock purchase of equipment and advance funding from the general fund working capital to fund the rolling stock order for delivery in 2022. That's a mouthful.
This was a discussion that we had. At this time, we have the spreadsheet that's attached, the resolution is attached to, is kind of interesting to write because it's an interesting project. So what's happening is we've got 4 departments, sheriff, facilities, parks, and highway, that have been pretty much told, just due to the supply chain issues with vehicles, they need to put an order in 2021 in order to get their rolling stock for 2022. So that we know, we were going to amend the 2021 project. At this time, they believe that they can put the order in with purchase upon delivery. But I've also added in a advance from the general fund for the total amount of all 4 of those departments. If the vendor they're working with changes their mind and says you need to pay now in order to get that, they don't. Currently, they all believe they can have payment on delivery in 2022, but I added it because if that changes, we would come back to you anyway to ask for money. If we need it, it would be an advance from the general fund. And that is pretty much how I put the resolution together. And that's, hopefully we don't have this situation ever again, but just due to the fact that they have supply chain issues and the vendors they work with have been telling them they would need to order now, that's how we try to get this put together so they could still get equipment. And if a purchase needs to be paid for now, we would do that, and you're not tying the hands of a future board. So it is really going to truly be a 2021 project. And then in 2022, we would hopefully be able to, if need be, fund it through the 2022 CIP and basically pay the advance from the general fund back.
Michael, have you had a chance to review this resolution?
I have, as Christie indicated, I think this is pretty unique. I think what was discussed last time is still a question in my mind, which is, does this potentially violate the principle of binding future boards? There isn't any clear guidance on this issue. So I guess I would caution with that concern. I haven't found any specific authority or guidance one way or another on the issue.
Kurt?
Well, I guess the two parts. One, I don't know that we're, I'm not sure that we're binding another board because we're taking it out of reserve or fund balance today and committing those to those purchases today. It would be up to the future board to pay back those future funds if they so desire. The question that I still struggle with is this, is if if we came to the 2022 CIP program, we get to the 2022 CIP budget, and we find that we have literally no CIP funding, and we need to borrow for this rolling stock because we've purchased them effectively out of reserve. Would that prohibit us from bonding for them in 2022? And I think the answer to that question is yes, but that's just from my limited understanding of the bonding authority that you can't replenish after it's been paid for.
Chrissy, have we typically borrowed for rolling stock? Yeah.
We have and we can, and the problem is that you have to have a reimbursement resolution prior to buying something to tell everybody that you're gonna reimburse yourself. And secondly, it should be a 60-day one. So that's where Chairman Gibbs is correct. It doesn't allow for a really clean demonstration of you can't issue a reimbursement resolution for a bond issue you didn't issue or authorize, correct?
So let me just be the devil's advocate for trying to explore an approach. So historically, we've included the KIP as part of the budget. And it's been done concurrent. Is there an opportunity for us to approve the KIP earlier in the year for 2022? Or does it have to be tied to the budget because we're committing the resources to pay for it? I'm just trying to look for options, and that would get away from some of those concerns.
That's the only reason I made it in advance from ourselves, is because it allowed, the only reason I made it in advance from ourselves is because then we do have an actual CIP, an actual funding source, and it gives a little latitude that in 2022 you could use funds to pay ourselves back, but the borrowing would not be an option from what we understand.
In light of I hope this is a unique situation, given the supply side in computer chips and other issues that affect our ability to obtain things in a timely manner. So we can do this without creating a precedent, and hopefully, if that's the desire.
Are these all vehicles, Christie, or equipment?
In the packet from last June, the June meeting, there should be a chart, some squads, up to 10 squads, a 1-ton truck. The highway had several pieces of equipment, but mostly a vehicle type piece of equipment, and Parks had a few items too. There may be like one mower, but most of them are vehicles.
Have we had confirmation from all of the vendors that these purchases do have to be ordered, a year in advance to receive in 2022? I mean, do we have confirmation that that's accurate, that all of these have to be ordered that year in advance? From what I'm hearing is that, the supply chain issues and problems more than likely will be resolving themselves. You're already starting to see a resolution to supply issues on wood products is dropped significantly in the last month. So I'm just a little concerned we're setting precedent and jumping the gun before we actually know that we actually have a problem. We're seeking a solution to a problem that we're not 100% verified that it exists.
Yeah, the only information I have is that one I received from all the departments at this time.
So we have the option of taking it up today. We have the option of taking it up in the future when more is clear. I think what happened is when people began preparing budgets, they began to, if you will, just check on supply side, and that's the information they were given. And I continue to hear that there are still shortages in certain areas, particularly in computer components and computer chips. But you're right that can change, but we don't know. So what are your wishes? Do you want to hold this over for until the next meeting to get a better feel, to just check on whether the fundamental premise that supply side is a problem is verified? Or do you want to advance it today?
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Go ahead.
I'd make a recommendation that we actually verify from the vendors, or get some kind of verification from each of the vendors, that all of these items that are listed in this $1,504,756 request by various departments, that is the case, that they have to be ordered today if they're going to be received or expected delivery of 2022. Again, I don't want to seek a solution if the problem self-corrects. At the same token, I don't want to inhibit our departments from their ability to provide the services to the citizens. So if we can just do a quick verification with each of those departments and the vendors that they're utilizing, and get some verification that they need to order those now and that they're backlogged that far.
All right, the options then are, as we look at this issue, taking it up at our second meeting of the month, which would be the same day as the county board meeting. And so if we have that verification, we could do that, and we could do I don't know if you wish to put a placeholder on the agenda. We'll leave that up to you, and we can go from there. But I would interpret your comments as a motion to postpone to the next meeting for purposes of verification, supply side.
I already typed it that way.
Is there a second? seconded by McEwen. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I understand the pre-ordering, but are we certain that if they have to be pre-ordered, they have to be paid for? Okay, because I know facilities, I think Terry had told us that his required a payment before what was ordered?
Contract.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to postpone will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. So from the perspective of follow-up, who will follow up? Christie, will you follow up with the parties for the? Okay, thank you. All right, resolution to amend the 2021 KIP to proceed with the court hearing room B construction. Who's going to take the lead on, Mike?
I'll just start that you have a resolution to amend the 2021 CIP for a project that costs approximately $186,000 some odd dollars. And the funding, it is a 2021 project. We borrowed for 2021 CIP projects already, and there are two projects that will come in under budget, and that would be the juvenile facility roof replacement. We have $150,000 there, and a courthouse south penthouse roof replacement. That would be the funding source. And because we borrowed for it for the projects that are in 2021 only, adding this to that pot of projects would allow us then to use that funding source that would not be needed for those two projects to pay for this courtroom B construction and registered deeds remodel, and a resolution to that effect is in your packet, and that is where the funding for that project would come from.
So the resolution before us has the 2021 highway fund balance. So has that been?
I will
updated?
fix that because I copied the one I made last month for this one, and I have to change that, so thanks for catching it.
Okay. Michael?
You bet. Thanks, Christy, for that. Just on the project itself, I did discuss this with Administrator Leonard prior to today's meeting. As everyone's aware, due to the pandemic, there's been a significant delay in most of the court hearings that are going on here at the courthouse. Although we are back to in-person court, many jury trials have had to be postponed. Other hearings have not been held. This court hearing room B would allow both of our court commissioners to operate simultaneously. Right now, they both are not able to go at the same time. In addition, all 6 of our branches would be able to operate at the same time as the 2 court commissioners. So really opens up additional courtroom space, allows additional hearings to move forward, and potentially allows our courthouse staff, our judges, and all of our justice teams to move those caseloads forward. So that's really the goal of the actual construction. And we're looking to have that over next to courtroom A, which is down by branch 5 and the Register of Deeds on the first floor.
Kurt?
I guess 2 questions. One, I understand these funds are coming from Ballard funds, and they are from savings from 2 potential projects that we've allocated from those bonded funds. The question I guess I have is, does or would this project qualify for American Rescue Plan funds? And then 2, I understand that the $186,538 does require, because it was bonding, does require CIP project. Do we have any other CIP projects that we paid for out of CIP funding in fund balance, CIP fund balance, that we could use these bonded funds for, instead than using ARP funds to fund this courtroom remodel.
I don't have an answer for you.
Do we have the ability, Christie, at a later time, if we were to adopt this resolution today, to make a subsequent transfer at a later date, changing it for hypothetically from the KIP fund balance to the ARPA funds, should that be the decision?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the specifics of the courtroom are, so I can't tell if it qualifies for ARPA, but yeah, we can do that.
So-
99% sure we
So
can. do that.
perhaps in order to move it, because I think there's a desire to get the work done, do we want to advance it with a footnote, if you will, to revisit the funding source once we have better clarity from the Department of Revenue on its eligibility, and to bring that up at a future meeting to be determined?
The only question becomes then, because we have the excess from bonding, the 186 from bonding, we have to identify the CIP projects that 186 is going to be utilized for in the bonding documentation, correct?
It's
General?
2021 CIP. It's already 2021 CIP projects that are non-private activity. So we're gonna spend it on those self-identified projects we've already identified in the project. This one meets all those parameters, so you can just squeeze that one right in because it's a courtroom. We're not gonna sell it to anybody. So it would meet those criteria, so that's why it would be appropriate. So the resolution as is, you can go right ahead and get that done. And then once we have a little more detail on whether it meets the ARPA, we could do a budget transfer.
So you're suggesting that the budget transfer be from ARPA to the CIP after the fact?
I don't know if it meets.
I don't know how we can identify the same project two different times. I guess what my point is, if we wanted to use the 186 for something other than the courtroom remodel, that's from bonding, we have to identify those, or it's in the CIP plan currently. And it would be projects that already were funded with CIP fund balance. Then we would fund this project with ARP funds instead.
But as long as, my understanding is that as long as the expenses were incurred after that March 21st date, that we can go and do this. That gives us the ability to check out and develop our processes for the ARPA funds, so.
I'm just concerned that we're identifying bonding funds for this project now, and then later wanting to substitute ARP funding for it later, and not having identified where the bonding funds then goes. Does the question make any sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And what I would do is run it like this. And then if we have ARPA funds that are qualified and we missed our ability to get it done right now, I would come back with a budget transfer only to transfer the project from CIP, the 186, to the ARPA subfund, which you've already passed, so that we can use those funds instead of this. We had to do that with routes to recovery because we kept getting clarification and it kept expanding on things we could expense. So What we would do is just do a journal entry and move this out of the CIP to the ARPA and ask you to verify that with a budget transfer, and then we report it on ARPA in the quarter that it was established. So that's why I think it would be just fine, because in most of these cases, the expansion of what qualified were things that we then moved back into like routes to recovery.
That still is, wouldn't there be another budget request, transfer requirement for the 186 from bonding to some other project?
We would move the project into the bonding.
We would move another project into the bonding.
Yep.
So there still would be two actions by this committee.
All right, what are your wishes? Understanding that it's not the highway fund balance, but rather the 2021A KIP fund balance. So what are your wishes? Motion would be in order? Moved by Supervisor McEwen. Is there a second?
And which motion was that?
That was to approve to amend the 2021 KIP to proceed with Court Hearing Room B construction with the funding coming out of the 2021A KIP fund balance. That was the motion. Is there a second?
Second, as long as we get clarification that if it qualifies for ARP funding, that we utilize ARP funding for that project.
All right, any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no? Oh, yep. Opposed, no? Generally, I got to wait a little bit longer for you. All right, that motion carries unanimously. Next issue, these are meant to be the beginning of discussions on policy issues relating to our long-term capital planning process. We currently have a 5-year capital plan in name only. We've never done that. And Allison, you and Jonathan and Kurt and others have been working on trying to get your arms around that, but we thought we ought to begin the discussion on what that long-term capital planning process might look like.
Do you want me to just go over what we've talked about thus far, or? Okay, yes, so there has been a small work group. Unfortunately, we had a little break. We haven't met in a little while, but earlier in the spring, we met multiple times to start going over our capital improvement process and really take a look at where we need to clarify and just do some cleanup, because it's been some time since we've really looked at the process and determined if it's still working for us as a county. So really, I think it's coming down to some let me find my notes. So one of the major things we talked about is really how we categorize the projects that come our way. We talked a lot about maintenance versus life cycle versus truly new projects. Those are kind of the three categories or buckets we kept coming back to. And this all started from sort of that broad issue that we've all been aware of for some time, is that maintenance projects that need to be done are postponed, costing the county more money because we're not taking care of it when we can as needed. And then we see other newer projects, maybe flashier projects, maybe projects that aren't the same level of priority, get ranked higher in the CIP process. The library roof is that classic example. You know, it was pushed off for a decade, and we all kind of knew that it should have been taken care of, but because of how the CIP ranking came down to it, our own process was getting in the way. Or so that's what we, wanted to investigate. So the maintenance, the life cycle, and the new projects were something we kept coming back to. Another thing is just looking at how our budgets change, our programs change. I think an easy kind of example to wrap your head around as just in your own life and maybe in your own workplace is computer software. So software programs used to be a physical thing that you purchased on a disk or what have you, and that was your program until it broke down. You could limp by, make things last longer. Now, however, a lot of software program has changed to a subscription, a monthly fee, a yearly fee. So that was definitely something that we need to take a better look at, see how much of that is going on in our county and how we then categorize that as perhaps it needs to be in a different bucket than it was previously. Those were kind of some of the major discussions we had just on a large scale look. The other thing being, which we're kind of experimenting with now, is the CIP committee. And that committee was a mixture of county board supervisors and staff and citizens who largely determined and ranked projects and put together that document that then the finance committee and the full board would have access to. And I think what the work group has settled on is perhaps a preference for putting more accountability to the finance committee to be in charge of that ranking document versus a CIP committee. So that's something we've already previously discussed, and took action to suspend the CIP committee currently. So that is something that we'll have to look at long-term more permanently. Are there any questions that you have to maybe guide what this discussion should be right now?
So I don't know if Terry's still on, but we retained, what is it, facilities dude? What's the facility dude? So how are we building that into our capital plan?
Mr. Chairman, I had the opportunity to sit down with Terry and Troy and the individual that is in charge of Facility Dude, which is a software program that has multiple components to it. It has a break fix tracking, if you will, project tracking part of the software that it utilizes for individuals calling in and identifying work orders. It also has in its capacity a capacity to identify life cycle items and necessary maintenance. So it has a scheduling component for scheduling necessary maintenance on air conditioning, for example, or heating and cooling and ductwork and that type of thing. Both of those portions of the program work very well for capital facilities and capital management. The one area that is a little bit of a struggle is the portion that identifies end of life cycle. So it provides, and part of it was possibly when the initial data was installed, there was 5 individuals that came and assisted in creating the database of all of the county facilities and all of the identified equipment / if you will, services, whether they be utility, whether they be air conditioning, whether they be HVAC, whatever, and each components. And so one of the things that was really challenging was because they had 5 different people, they had 5 different sets of nomenclature as to what an item was. So in other words, if you had a utility closet in the courthouse and you had one individual call that the utility closet, in another facility they might have labeled it something else. And so the challenge was, and they're still working on some of that, re-identification. But it provides a overall number, but it doesn't give you without drilling down through into the program, what the total items are. So it'll give you, for example, 2025, you have $10 million worth of needed maintenance to perform, but in order to detail what that $10 million worth of items are, you need to go into 12 different reports to identify what they are. And so, and then the other thing is that software is already, as Allison quite properly alluded to, that program is no longer being serviced. There is 3 revisions out there and a new program that's already replaced that, and the sticker shock on it is quite enormous. So it's a matter of whether or not we utilize that software, continue to utilize it for the 2 areas that they're currently utilizing it in, work order and scheduling, or do we move to the new program and it has more integration. Like I said, I think there's some challenges there. It does provide a current report, but it's really challenging to identify what specific projects are in the total overall dollar figure. Again, you can get there, but you have to go through a report from each facility. So each building has to have an identified report saying, oh, it happens to be your HVAC for the courthouse, or it has to be roof section A on the courthouse, or it has to be the water heater in the jail facility. Or like I said, it doesn't give you a lot of, it can, but it's very cumbersome. So, I think it's something that we can utilize as long as we understand the limitations that it has.
Other thoughts?
Thank you. I know this issue is probably going to be coming to rules review as far as the CIP. Is there going to be, do you have a timeline, something that we could use when rules review starts? Just something to look at? Or is that, I mean, if it's not possible, I still think it needs to be discussed there.
I guess my question to you, Craig, would be when does rules review plan on starting their work on their process?
Last time we started in October, so.
I think currently right now what we're seeing is, we're seeing that facilities and capital management will play a bigger role in identifying, what is necessary maintenance, what is life cycle items, and this committee will have a potential more role in new projects and ranking of those new projects that are newly identified, and not necessarily the ranking of maintenance projects and/or life cycle projects. Let facilities and maintenance do facilities and maintenance work, and identify those projects that need to be replaced. We will still have oversight on those, but I think that if I were, and then I think the other thing, as Allison clearly, or the vice chair clearly pointed out, is that there'll be a shift from software ownership and software programs as a general in the CIP to software licensing being operational, potentially housed internally in department budgets. So that's where I see that. And so some of that will move out of CIP ranking and into, it becomes problematic because it becomes operational instead of capital. But there's also the exploration of whether or not there's an ability to capitalize some of those licensing costs.
I think that last point that Kurt made is important, because I think we're going to have to look at how do we approach that whole issue of our licensing, and we're looking at multi-million-dollar investments in HR finance systems that over a period of time, and if we have to turn that into operations, there goes all of our net new construction, probably for years to come. So we'll have to figure out how do we build that into the plan, and as we get these longer term agreements, you don't know what the life of the contract is going to be because they pull out their support. But I would think if we're going to leases, you would be in a better position to potentially get a time certain commitment to a version of the software. So we may be able to put that in there. We should be able to put rolling stock in. There's still components of the IT in terms of a minimum level relative to hardware replacement, above and beyond even our PCs. So we can get some of that in there. But are there some other parameters that you'd like to see us address? And does it make sense for us to try to begin to forecast at this time out for 5 years, or do we wait for the Kayenta replacement to come on board to give us that? I guess that's one of the discussions. Do we go with our current system, or is our current system so limited in tracking that we should be looking at trying to roll this effort into the new HR finance system?
Mr. Chair, if I might, I think, I don't disagree that the new ERP system will be an additional tool that we can utilize to do budget forecasting and better. I don't know that eliminates the need to understand what our capital needs are for capital projects long-term, though. I think the onus falls back on, in some cases, falls back on facilities and maintenance, identifying life cycle items and maintenance items. Now, some break fixes are obviously just that. They're emergencies and they're break fixes. But, and new projects, and that's why I fall back on, the ranking of projects are new projects that this committee is going to be, heavily invested in, and still have oversight for the others. However, I think the onus is going to be shifted back to departments, as far as, and more relying on facilities and maintenance to be able to do that projecting for us, so that we have an understanding of what the need is for the county. Obviously, those can change, but I think they can assist us in providing a much better handle on what that 5-year maintenance is, what that 5-year life cycle is on items in a 5-year CIP. So I don't think waiting does us, is necessary for the new ERP system to put in place the processes. I think the ERP system can assist us moving forward, but I think we still want to set the parameters on who's responsible, because if we say we're going to hold off till we have the new ERP system, which may be 3 years full of implementation, we're 3 years behind the 8 ball on getting closer to a 5-year true CIP projection.
Just to, I don't know, to go take it back to the rules and review, I mean, we absolutely can provide that document. However, that process usually works for something like this with rules and review. Lance, of course, has been kind enough to be making, when we were having our meetings regularly, he was the one kind of in real time updating our current CIP document. So, I mean, we do have something started. We just need to clarify a few more things. I guess if we do need to bring it before rules and review in October, what sort of timeline should we be following, to get back into this and have a document to present, a policy document to this committee?
I don't know that you need to be done in October. I think we need to be deliberate and thorough in that process, because I'll start meeting in October. But Christy, the question that I would ask, and Kurt, I agree 100% with what you're saying in terms of the need to do this now. How do we go about changing the way we gather projects from departments in order to make a 5-year capital plan meaningful? And so do you have any thoughts on how we would go about that? Because I think what we're currently focusing on a very short range process. And how might we go about gathering that information? Do we rely on facilities and maintenance to do some life cycle? Do we rely on the departments?
I think it's a training, because some of the departments, for example, the airport has a lot of their projects which are FAA approved. Well, we need to make sure we define that everything, including ones that are run not by our airport. Actually, those projects are run through the Bureau of Aeronautics. So we really just need to make sure we clarify and define what we feel are projects that need to be in the CIP, and then county administration, along with my department, probably facilities, needs to educate the departments on what those definitions are, and then develop timelines in order to get that information to you. Because they would be a good example of a $16 million runway, 100% approved by FAA, Bureau of Aeronautics, $0 county. It's a huge project, but we want to make sure they clearly understand it's defined as capital improvement project plan under our definition, even though there's $0 county dollars in it. That would be it when you're going out to get an engineering estimate on a new highway garage. That starts contacting facilities and capital management to understand that that's a project that needs to be put on a timeline. And as estimates change, we would then amend those projects based on that. Otherwise, a lot of them are, pretty middle of the road. Vice Chair Leahy did a good job of explaining what we have: the rolling stock, the maintenance projects, and new projects. New projects are the ones that really are the ones that you're going to need to make sure you clearly define and we communicate to the departments, and that they then know how to bring those back so that they're incorporated in the full CIP.
Go ahead.
I think the other thing is an education to our department heads, and saying, look, provide us with a 5-year forecast of what you anticipate. Life cycle items are probably the easy ones, but and to some extent, maybe we need to hold department heads accountable, for new projects, so that we get them forward looking and saying, hey, okay, you can't come May 25th with a $20 million project that we haven't even seen the first iteration of or discussion of, and want it funded in the 2022 CIP. So it's education to the department heads and holding them accountable to bring those projects and be forward-looking as far as projects. Now, obviously, some things are out of their control, but if it's a new project, it isn't something that came up at the last minute unless it's an emergency. And asking them to forecast their needs 5 years down the road and get them forward-looking.
Christie, could we look to you? Well, I guess maybe we look to the work group, but you said, administration, finance, and to a degree, probably facilities maintenance to begin to rough out what a policy or what the parameters and a rough outline of what that might look like?
Yep.
Is that,
And I think Vice Chair Leahy has county administration, facilities, and finance on that work group, so I think that we're perfect.
there's our solution.
Yeah.
So you're saying we'll rough out a timeline for department heads to follow?
A process.
Yeah, the work group's got its situation going, and then you would cast us into the wild with your orders, and we would get that worked out.
Anything else? Anything else? If not, we will move on to the policy on the sale and disposition of excess county property. And we've had a couple of great examples lately. Michael?
Thank you. So this was another item that I spoke with Administrator Leonard about. There's actually an Attorney General opinion that touches on this issue. It's from 1991. What that opinion from the Attorney General indicates is that while the county can't acquire land specifically to lease it out for a private purpose, if land that we previously acquired for a public purpose then becomes not suitable for that public purpose, we are authorized to lease to a private entity unless the circumstances of the lease demonstrate that the land has become surplus. So if we have an interim time period between when land is being used for a public purpose and when land might again be used for public purpose, during that period of time, we can actually lease it out to a private entity. There's authority in this Attorney General's opinion as well as in some case law that this opinion touches on. So that was an opinion that Administrator Leonard had found and wanted the committee to take note of and potentially discuss whether the county wished to look into a policy on that issue.
Well, we have, I'm thinking of our most recent acquisition of the law firm. Probably stretches that, but I think we have a purpose, long-term purpose with a stated plan. The question, one of the fundamental questions though is, what property do we own? And I know that Lance has, in discussions, talked about the parking lot on the other side of the Reeser gas station. We had an example at the Infrastructure Committee last week where Weston wanted an easement through a parcel that we owned, that the easement would have rendered the parcel useless. And so why are we owning it? Why don't we transfer that? So do we know what we own? And have we characterized or classified that property that is, for instance, is it part of a plan? Was it acquired for a specific purpose in the future? Was it acquired through tax delinquency? And we own a lot of property through tax delinquency, as we saw today. And how do we move those parcels? But are there properties, and we're going to be going through this with Social Services, River Drive, the parking lot, and others, what is our policy and procedure for determining, is it critical to our current mission? Is it critical to a future mission? Is it surplus? And how do we go about doing that? And what criteria would we use? And who does that work? And maybe the treasurer could generate a report for all the properties we own. Might be a great place to start. Any thoughts? Kurt?
You're absolutely right. I think, you know, the first is to identify what currently the county owns, and that's clear, that's easily, well, I shouldn't say easily done, but it may be a little bit, when I first was elected to the board some almost 16 years ago, one of the first things that the board in its orientation was put on a bus, and we drove around the city, the neighboring municipalities, and seen all of, or a small fraction of some of the property that the county owns. So I think you're right, understanding what we own, but then and setting up the criteria, if it's part of a long-term plan and it's not currently being utilized, a prime example would be the potential law firm over here that has currently owned our last acquisition, as you earlier mentioned. But I think it's of significance that it's in a plan around a redevelopment or remodel of the courthouse, or is part of that plan. But I think we're going to see in the near future that we're going to have significant space available down at NCHC when the remodel is totally completed, and we also have Lakeview Professional Building right now that several floors are vacant. So we have the opportunities potentially to relocate some departments, and the short-term in relative figure, 3 to 5 years, we're looking at potentially relocating social services, and that becoming a surplus property. So what's the criteria that we utilize for determining when it's excess, and then what is the disposition going to be? Is there going to be a requirement that the disposition be highest and best use? Is the disposition geared towards economic development? Is the disposition, so I think those are the criteria that we need to spell out as to if it doesn't fit into the long-term facilities plan of the county and/or the plan for future expansion, such as the West Side Master Plan, then it's identified as excess property, and then how do we dispose of it, and what is the criteria we're going to utilize when evaluating the bids on those properties for consideration for the taxpayer.
Other thoughts? Any other thoughts? Well, we'll start with that inventory, and we'll figure out how to do that. And I think Kurt raised that important question of if we had a community partners campus approach us and wanting to give us a little bit less money for a building that advanced our overall goal and mission, would we accept that? And I think that's important for us to begin the process of thinking how we might go about doing that. So I think we've got some good thoughts, and I think we probably should pay attention to the weather. Any other thoughts on either of these, Jonathan?
No, just listening to that conversation was spot on. You know, if we don't know what we would be able to utilize, or the assets in hand, what could be reduced, or what, you know, needs to be fully utilized, it makes it hard to get past that point if we don't have that inventory.
All right.
I know that Supervisor Gibbs was, joking a little bit about the field trip, but that actually is kind of a good idea. If not for the full board, at least if this turns into, a bigger policy discussion that we tackle in this term, at least getting the finance members on a bus maybe. And it's difficult sometimes to, if you've never seen where this property is, to even understand how it fits into the long-term plan. Maps only do so much, so sometimes it might be nice to take a physical viewing of some of these things. But in favor of the field trip.
Well, especially when you've got, the future potential of a morgue facility, a future potential of a combined highway, land conservation zoning department, parks and rec combined facility potentially. What does that free up? We've got Lakeview Plaza down there right now. 2 floors are empty or vacant right now that were a year ago at this time still being rented to an entity that provides services to the citizens of Marathon County. And we also are in the midst of a $73 million renovation at NCHC that's going to free up a significant amount of space down there that, and I think one of the things that's been highlighted by the pandemic is potentially the ability to work from home, at least potentially for some, and potentially less need for, potential office space. So I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. I just got to throw the Regional Morgue Task Force. We're looking for a location as we speak. And we've been finding that some of the commercial locations are extremely expensive. So it may be a good idea that we start looking internally for space that we already own. I know there would be a remodel, but even the commercial areas that we're looking at, they're just a shell, so you'd be remodeling them anyway. So I totally agree that I think we should start looking at opportunities that we can utilize that we already own. Thank you.
All right, anything else on this? If not, we will try to develop an approach and bring that back at a future meeting. But I think a good discussion to start it off. And a possible tour, road trip. It's a road trip.
I second the tour. I'm in.
All right. Any announcements? Our next meeting is July 27th. We will be spending a good portion of that dealing with KIP and some other follow-up items, but we'll start that process of project evaluation and figure out how we're going to do that this year, and it'll be a learning experience for all. Anything else? Any other announcements? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order. Move to adjourn. Moved by McEwen, seconded by Leahy. He's nodding, yes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. We're done. Are you here to kick us out?
No, I'm observing.
What is it gonna do? We have very few nice ash trees, and one of them